We begin tonight with details of a cross-border terror investigation. A 20-year-old Toronto man is facing charges in Canada and the U.S. He's accused of trying to cross the border to carry out a mass shooting in a Jewish center in New York. Tricia Kindleman has been following this story for us today. Tricia, what more have we learned about the investigation?
Well, Sarah, I can tell you it's been a detailed investigation that's been underway since late 2023. Now, there has been an affidavit that CBC News has been able to review that was from U.S. investigators, and they say that they started to follow 20-year-old Mohammed Shazeb Khan, also known as Shazeb Jadoon, around November 2023. So now we have a bit of a statement here for you as well, just on what they have learned. It says on or around September 4th, as Khan said he planned to do in connection with his attack, Khan attempted to reach the U.S.-Canada border. It went on to say that is part of their investigation. He was attempting to do so while Khan used 3 separate cars to travel across Canada towards the United States before he was stopped in or around Ormston, which is in Quebec, just approximately 12 miles from the U.S.-Canada border. So now, if we want to take a look back a bit at this timeline of this investigation, again, as I mentioned, they began monitoring him around November 2023 when they began noticing him posting on social media, as well as using encrypted apps to speak with people. In July 2024, they say that's when he moved the communication to a different encrypted messaging platform, and he continued communicating with undercover sources that were working with the FBI and a number of different organizations that were tracking him. So between late July and mid-August, they say that he continued discussing plans for an attack on Jewish institutions or large public gatherings. But now this initial discussion didn't actually center on New York City. That happened on August 20th. That was when in his communications he decided or he shared that he would like to change the plan, change the target to New York City, specifically to a Jewish center in Brooklyn. The affidavit details ongoing online communications from a variety of accounts. Plans also were discussed, including multiple attackers with multiple locations, and they also discussed types of ammunition and weapons that they would be using. So then that's where we get to September 1st, when Canadian law enforcement was involved, and they say they witnessed him moving out of a residence in the GTA. September 2nd, there was some more communication, and then we come to September 4th, which is where they say they observed him in the GTA that morning, where he did then make his way toward Napanee, Ontario, picked up a person along the way, switched vehicles, headed towards Montreal around lunchtime, entered a third vehicle and with an unknown woman and a new driver. And it was just shortly before 3 o'clock that officers stopped that vehicle in Ormston, about, again, 12 miles from that border, or 20 kilometers or so. Sarah.
Tricia, looking at these pictures here, we see a lot of police officers in that town so close to the border. What do we actually know about the police operation that took place?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, there was a heavy police presence. Now, the town of Ormston is quite a small community. It's quite quiet, residents say. Our colleagues at Radio Canada did a number of interviews and were on the ground with this earlier today. They spoke to a witness about exactly what she saw. Here's what she had to say.
Oh, there must have been 50 at least. There is, I don't know, probably 20 in the green uniforms, the army uniforms, the camouflage with the M16s. And then there was probably another 20 or 30 with police vests. They were plain clothes and they had vests. They were all cars from Ontario. There was no Quebec cars involved.
So as we heard from that affidavit and also some witnesses at the scene, there were other individuals involved. There has been no specifics around whether those people are still in custody or what sort of charges, if any, they may be facing. But as we should note, the suspect in this case is facing 3 charges in Canada, a number of charges in the U.S. as well. And we know that he will be in court in Montreal again on September 16th, Sarah.
CBC's Tricia Kindleman. Thank you, Tricia. Okay, I want to dig deeper now. We're going to be joined now by Neil Bisson. He is the Director of Global Intelligence Knowledge Network and a retired CSIS intelligence officer. Welcome. Good to talk to you.
Thanks for having me on.
So, Neil, you're in Ottawa. You've worked there for a while. The RCMP arrested a Toronto area man in connection with a terror investigation Wednesday in a Quebec town near the U.S. border. When you hear this, and the fact that there was the U.S. and Canada involvement here, what do you make of it and the fact that it went down like this?
Well, I see this as another win for the collaboration between the RCMP and the FBI and our national security and our policing units. It's great.
It is the second terrorism-related arrest that we have seen in recent months. It was just, I think, a little more than a week ago we heard about a foiled plot in Toronto. Are we seeing an increase in terror-related events?
I think we're seeing an increase in ISIS terrorism events globally, not just in Canada, but we're seeing it in Germany. We're seeing it, almost 6, 7, 8 months ago back in Russia. ISIS is making a resurgence, and it's frightening.
Why do you think we're seeing this increase then?
I think it's a combination of a few things. One of them has to do with the continued coverage of what's happening with in Israel with Gaza. I think we're also seeing the propaganda machine that ISIS is notorious for is ramping up, and there are individuals that are being sympathetic towards these causes, and they're lashing out.
Just reading into what we've heard from the U.S. Justice Department in terms of how they went about learning about this alleged plot, undercover officers talking on encrypted platforms. How do police go about mitigating this kind of a danger? Talk to me a little bit about the techniques they use in terms of trying to root this out.
Having undercover officers working online is a great opportunity for them to identify individuals of concern. And once it leads from the point of simple chatter to planned attacks and making the decision to go ahead and perpetrate those attacks, these individuals who are working undercover with police organizations or working for the police organizations are best placed to identify these threats and to hopefully stop them from happening.
Off the top, let me say, obviously, the plot, the recent one that's been alleged, there's been an arrest made and it wasn't carried out. The one from a week ago, it also was a foiled plot. So that is good news, of course. But is Canada doing enough to ensure this kind of these plots aren't taking place to begin with?
I think we've been fortunate. Canada, as you said, there's been 2 plots that have been stopped, and we're hoping that if there are any more, that they're being closely monitored and hopefully they're stopped as well. What it comes down to is the amount of resources, money, and energy that's being put into preventing these things from happening. Luckily, we are in a good cooperation with other Five Eye countries to get as much information as we can in relationship to these terrorist-related organizations and their doings. So I think Canada is doing what they can at this point in time, and I think we just need to realize that this is becoming a new resurgence and that more energy and time and money needs to be put towards preventing this from happening.
Based on what you know from your time working with CSIS, do you think that our friends in these Five Eye countries, specifically the United States, do you think that they think that Canada is doing enough?
I believe so. I think that every intelligence organization, law enforcement organization realizes that this is not just a threat that's happening in one country or another. It's a global threat. And as much as we like to think that, or as much as some others would like to think that this is a problem that Canada needs to deal with, it's a problem that the world needs to deal with. And through cooperation within our own organizations, domestically and internationally, we will help to prevent this from continuing to happen and to continue to identify these individuals who are willing to do this.
Neil Bisson, Director of Global Intelligence Knowledge Network and a retired CSIS intelligence officer. Good to speak with you. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on.